Welcome. My name is Reverend Jude Geiger. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister serving Community Church in New York City. This is Roots to Leaves, looking at the Unitarian Universalists and Unitarian Universalists, history, theology, and polity, and what it means for us today. And this season, I'm joined by Brother Zachary, our chaplain for pastoral care at Community Church. And Brother Zachary?
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I am a Franciscan friar, an ordained Catholic priest out of St. Joseph Mission Church in New Jersey, serving as a chaplain, and we're talking about acceptance of one another today. Just offering some of the Catholic perspective to Unitarian Universalist values. Reverend Jude, you and I had a very generative conversation the other day about pluralism and the ways that Unitarian Universalism is really an inherently pluralist tradition. I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts on that to start us off.
Right, so pluralism, big word that means multiple worlds, views, cultures exist, and that's valuable. Diversity is a value, and pluralism, as far as we understand it, in our context, is living in a world with that reality and acting as if that which was real is real. There's a variety in the world. That's a positive human experience, and let's celebrate that. And
go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
What the acceptance Brother Zachary was talking about, in our tradition, we have one of our principles is where we covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. And the conversation we were having with pluralism the other day was, how do you do pluralism as a religion in this world? And you were about to say something, Brother Zachary?
Well, I wanted to acknowledge the ways in which this is a particularly difficult topic from my tradition. We have a explicit value in hegemony and shared belief, shared practice, orthodoxy, orthopraxis, to use big words like that. But as a Catholic, there is a tension between the acceptance of one another and this tradition of evangelism, of spreading the word, of trying to expand our own religious identity to include members of other communities. And that is a tension that has caused a great deal of conflict throughout history. It's caused a great deal of religious trauma, and it has caused a great deal of rifts within our religious community. And I think some of those rifts continue to live not only in Catholic communities, but in the religious communities that are still influenced by that religious trauma. And I think that can make us a little bit hesitant to guide one another towards spiritual fulfillment or towards spiritual enrichment, for fear that we are causing that religious harm, telling people they're doing it wrong, impressing upon others our own narrow view of right behavior. I think that causes a great deal of internal conflict, for me at least. I'm curious how you hear that.
How do I hear that? As someone Catholic, how do I hear that? I imagine for some of us that's really healing to just have it said out loud that orthodoxy or tradition has its challenges, and it does. Pluralism has its challenges.
Yes.
And a lot of our folks, those of our folks who are coming into us from another tradition, who are coming to us with religious trauma, not all of our people have religious trauma, that is something that we're working through in our ministry. And it's a value, I think, also, of course, to have you from your Catholic perspective on the team. There's a message there that in a pluralistic faith like ours, the ministry team can be of different traditions too. And if religion is helping us to make meaning and understand meaning in the world and to heal in the human experience, it's quite beautiful to have a church with more than one tradition of clergy trying to do that.
It is a powerfully beautiful symbol, I think, and this is the first community that I have been able to participate in that sort of religious diversity. In some ways, I think Unitarian Universalism brings to the conversation about religious pluralism this technology that doesn't I don't think begin in Unitarian Universalism. The traditions of covenant extend much before that, but the way that covenant is practiced here, with intention, with acknowledgement of its messiness, is I think a very strong resource in trying to live out pluralist values. It's a bit of technology, I think, covenanting that Catholics can learn quite a bit from. We've had some also strong witness of examples of interreligious engagement and shared collaboration, particularly on social justice issues, that I'm very proud of in our tradition. I think covenanting is one of those unique bit of technology that could bring us a little bit closer together. I would like to ask you, Reverend Jude, what is covenanting, and what is it that allows us to work together from different contexts and from different traditions?
What is covenanting? Well, you mentioned before that covenanting comes before the Unitarian Universalist tradition, and that language in our tradition comes out of Judaism before Christianity. And there's historically the language is between God and a people, and that is one type of covenant, God's covenant with the people, where there's a promise made and promises in return in relationship. And it's that spirit in Unitarian Universalist circles. We start with covenant, even committee meetings or board meetings start with, how do we agree to show up with each other? And it's not about rules. It's not about punishments. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's about promises shared with one another.
That's so powerful. I know that I can lean into my sort of biblical roots and recognize the presence of covenant in the Bible, in the Old Testament, as agreements between God and people. But I don't think I considered the possibility of using that system of making shared agreements with one another in practice, in board meetings, in church council meetings, to guide small groups, to guide the relationship between a minister and the people and the congregation, let alone using the practice of covenant to guide relationships between communities, between ministers, between people in the congregation. What a foundational relationship, and I think an opportunity for us to use acceptance of one another as a tool for spiritual growth, individually and communally, relationally.
Say say more about that.
Sure. Yeah.
I gotta take notes, brother Zachary. How do we do it?
Oh gosh. Well, where the rubber hits the road, I suppose, is the hardest part of these conversations. I had the opportunity to speak with our supervisor, Reverend Peggy, on the Disrupt Church podcast, and we talked a little bit about the difference between acceptance and affirmation. I think personally for me, acceptance is really required for participation in community. It's kind of the baseline. It is. Without acceptance, we really can't get very far. If you don't accept the person sitting across from you, then it will be difficult to come to agreements, to deepen in relationship. There isn't so much an impulse or a moral component to acceptance. It really is a pragmatic and functional requirement to participation in a community. Now, I think affirmation goes the step beyond, and that might be the how-to of it. How do we get beyond accepting someone and get to affirming someone for who they are, for the skills and difficulties that they bring, for their life experiences, that affirmation is a relational quality as well. It might be the thing that is outside of a covenant, or on top of our sort of base agreements to just be civil with one another. How do we go the extra mile and show love, or be vulnerable? That's a tall ask. A lot of us are not ready for that level of relationship yet. But I do think that might be if I had to look for an answer for a how-to, Reverend Jude, it would be to move from acceptance to affirmation. So, because if we can affirm one another and be affirmed in our communities, that's the Holy Grail. That's where we become the beloved community. That's when we show the love of the divine through our practice as people.
It's reminding me of some of my improv training over the years in theater. You know, the basic rule is, how do you say yes to what your partner on stage is doing, and maybe congregations and churches help us to figure out at our best what's the positive yes we can say, and also a reminder that we sometimes have to say no to things. But I feel in our workspace, and our team of everyone that serves the church, in our covenant we have as a staff, as a ministry, as all of us, was essentially, there's a way in which we're saying, how do we say yes to your yes in our space together? And I wonder about that, in how that plays outside of our churches. How do we affirm others' humanity, the yes to their humanity,
Mm.
while not necessarily saying yes to behaviors or actions?
I hear what you're saying, and there's the deeper, I think, reality to our wider human community. That is, we don't get to pick who's our neighbor. We don't get to pick the folks who live far away from us, and there's an aspect of affirmation that can feel icky when we're talking about bad behaviors, or even difficult or dangerous behaviors. I think the interesting boundary for me of acceptance of one another comes in the form of times that another community might wish you harm, or might wish harm on your community. How can you be accepting of those people for their humanity and for their peoplehood, while being materially unable, and certainly on a moral level unwilling, to affirm their stance or belief or behavior? We are seeing that play out, I think, particularly in our communities right now, as this sense of divisiveness seems to spread across our country and our world. Affirmation of one another that is rooted in a certainty of the moral, how would we call that? Of some sort of moral or ethical imperative toward justice. This is a powerful and complicated issue. And I think that it's perhaps less complicated in my experience, but it's certainly complicated in relational experiences. Does that make sense? I don't feel I feel that it's simple in my heart, but hard to play out alongside others.
It makes sense. I think about it. When I was a kid, we didn't travel. I think I had I went on 3 weekend trips with my parents on vacation my entire childhood and teenage years. We just weren't in a financial place to be able to do that. And now my husband and I are able to travel most years, pandemic years aside, of course. And we made a lot of friends. We have a tendency to land, for one reason or another, in places that we're surrounded with people who don't necessarily share the same political values as my husband and I. And we talk to strangers all the time. He's one of those that just makes friends with everybody. And because of my my ministry work, often on vacation, I'm the one that just sits down and reads and enjoys the sun or whatever we're doing. And like, I really don't need to talk to one more person. I do that all the time, right? Not that I don't love talking to people. But as the week goes on and he's made friends with people, and then I get drawn in, we start talking about anything you can imagine. And we've wound up making friends with people who are so far different than us on the political aisle. But we have shared values that we talk about, and I push them.
Yes.
I don't leave it there. I mean, I don't, in our church work, I don't talk about politics as far as partisanship goes and who people vote for, but we talk about values. And so when I'm on vacation, I find myself talking to people who have a different understanding about the matter of women's reproductive rights. But I'm one of those annoying vacation people that doesn't shut up. And if it comes up, somehow it always does. I don't know why, as a Christian minister, when I'm on vacation with my male husband, people feel the need when they find out that I'm a minister to talk about politics. Don't know why. And we get there and we have long conversations and get to see people as human, and views shift over time.
I want to share a particular perspective that I think connects to this really beautiful relationship that I hear you sharing, Reverend Jude. This sort of outgoing willingness and openness to talk about difficult things, perhaps with even acquaintances, people that you are not familiar with already, people that you're only vacationing with. But I'm sure not all of those conversations are comfortable. I'm sure that there are experiences that you might experience hurt in those conversations. You might hear something that is about you that is misguided, or people might share something that brings up past hurt or past damage. But how courageous it is to talk to somebody knowing they might think differently than you. And I think that courage is part of the process. And I hear that what you're not doing is simply affirming someone else in a belief or a thought or a practice that might be troubling or hurtful to you. You say so. And that is a powerful witness, I think, also for me. Some in my tradition feel very strongly. You mentioned abortion, but this is a topic where acceptance of one another often gets thrown out the window. It's a topic that we, excuse me for that. It's a topic that we really use to identify a moral firmness as opposed to a willingness to see another human being as a human being. That moral firmness is not independent to clergy or to congregants. It is this attitude of being hardline for the sake of saving the world that really gets in the way of that relational quality that you're talking about. See the person in front of you, talk to them about their shared values. Maybe then we can start to talk about the hard stuff, the politics, the pain, the world as it is. Do you hear that?
And you did some processing there, even when you said abortion, which I didn't say. I
Right.
said women's reproductive health care. And the people that I talk to about that are thinking primarily and only abortion.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
that's a challenge in pluralism, that
Yes.
there are multiple stories in every conversation. I can say women's reproductive health care, and there's a whole narrative in our shared news cycle. Excuse me, our shared news cycles,
Yes.
shared newses. Is we have at least two or three streams of what even gets heard by people based
That's
on what
right.
you're listening to.
It's true. I'm thinking about the news, and we've been talking a lot about how engaging the news can be a difficult experience. It can cause our emotional discomfort at just seeing what is happening in the world. It can make us feel afraid. And Reverend Jude, I've heard you also share some of your experience about making that a prayerful moment or an opportunity for witness. And yet the news, and by that I mean sort of all of the media that we are inundated with, both through technology, through print media, through sort of internet headlines as well, but also in what we talk about amongst our communities, with our friends. The news, so to speak, is part of our shared vernacular. It's part of our shared language. And sometimes the stories that inform those narratives are not accepting of one another, let alone affirming of one another. I think that it's a powerful opportunity for me, being connected to this church at all, to investigate those assumptions, investigate some of the words that I pick, and maybe even to doubt the good intentions that I assume in myself. Is that fair?
I think it's fair, and I think it's also fair to say that there are not good intentions with megalith corporations, and media is an aspect of that messiness. Journalistic integrity is crucial to our democracy, and there are subversions of it by corporate interests, and that's not political. I mean, it has political implications, but that's actually happening. We could look at our economic systems and say news has advertising. That's a fact. We have commercials. I watch a lot of news channels throughout the day. They have commercials that I'm watching. And so capitalism, finance is a factor in how journalism is put out. So it's safe to say that there's some impact. And it's journalistic integrity is crucial to our democracy. Both of those are true. So I think when we're at our most essential, religiously, sacramentally, I think about your expression as a progressive Catholic, and when you get to the sacramental moment, communion, it remains a sacramental moment in any of your churches. You don't withhold it sacraments, regardless of people's political views or actions or voting record. And for us, at our most sacramental covenant for us, the agreements, the promises, we go back to that. It's a reset. Foundational to us in Universalism is that ultimately we are all restored in life, in spirit, in death. We each understand what that means differently, but we are universally, we're talking acceptance today, and that's not quite the word I would say. Saved, I would say. Others in my tradition wouldn't. And I think about how that essentialness in religion isn't what gets talked about when religion is levied for partisan reasons.
Reverend Jude, I couldn't agree with you more. That is a powerful shared commitment, I think, to the core of what it is that we are here to do. The community that I'm a part of as progressive Catholics find that to be the most essential and important aspect of our community, that we don't ask first whether you're a good Catholic before you are invited to participate in the communion, the communion, but also the sacraments in general that we hold dear as faithful Catholics. I think this idea that somehow communion should be a reward for succeeding, that participating in the sacramental life of the church is somehow a reward for being in right relationship, for voting correctly, for living your life within the boundaries of hegemonic expressions of faithful life. just misses the point on the beauty of humankind, misses the point on the reason that the Catholic Church even exists. And so what we say is that participation in the sacramental life of the Church is not a reward for doing well or for joining the right club. It's food for the journey. It's a guide for our lives. It's part of who we are and how we live out our faith. And so I hear that similarity in our traditions, Reverend Jude, that is a universal affirmation that is liberative. It's restorative. It isn't meant to indicate that we are, that our flaws are not a part of who we are. But it is meant to acknowledge flaw as part of how we live together, and it's not enough to keep us away from each other.
Yeah, our shared this. I think one of the most central stories of our shared traditions is starting with Jesus, who was around him all the time, not the principalities and powers in any stretch of the imagination, not what dominant society would have said was the right people.
It's true. And Jesus said very openly the wrong things to the right people. He was not looking for those kinds of friends.
So may we continue to say the right things to the wrong people, or the wrong to the right people.
I love that. I love that. And I think acceptance of one another looks like guiding powers to their humanity. And I think that we share that initiative as well in our social justice efforts. May we seek to accept one another in our persons and politics.
And encourage.
And encourage one another to spiritual growth. May it be so.
This has been another session of Roots to Leaves. Join us for our next.